I was with Santiago for 3 years, breaking up and getting back together over and over, being a hopeless simp for him, to the point of being ridiculous. Even his first love knew that I nearly lost half my life over him. So no one expected that in the end. The one who left first, the one who initiated the breakup, was me. Chapter 1. The day I truly felt that there was no turning back with Santiago was actually very ordinary. It was just a typical late July day, rainy and dim. In the dark evening, I had only one warm light on, and the whole house was hazy. When I went to close the window, I was absent-mindedly wondering whether Santiago had brought an umbrella. I pulled out my phone, glanced at the time. It was 9:30. He was still working overtime today. I sighed, intending to ask Santiago when he would finish work. If he didn't bring an umbrella, maybe I could go pick him up. But when I saw the chat log that looked like a one-sided bulletin board, my hand hovered over the send button, circling it a few times before deciding I couldn't send it. Forget it. Santiago had said it before, told me to stop doing these pointless, nagging little caring things. He wasn't a 3-year-old kid. If he was hungry, he'd eat. If it rained, he'd get home. There was no need for his girlfriend to act like a nanny running after him to take care of everything. I swiped right, exited the chat, put away my phone, and felt an inexplicable irritation. I just sat on the windowsill and stared outside. Closing the window blocked out the sound. Even the cars passing by on the street seemed to slow by half a beat. Absent-mindedly, I wiped the condensation off the glass. Neon lights flickered, and the distant lights gathered in one spot. Lately, I always seemed to be like this. My mind would go blank. I would space out unconsciously, aimlessly, not even knowing what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't thinking anything. WeChat made its ding-dong sound, followed by the ringing of a voice call. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe I was just waiting for a message from someone. I smiled bitterly, grabbing my phone in resignation, unlocking it in one swift motion. It wasn't Santiago. My best friend Clara's new profile picture stared silently at me, and I pressed the answer button. The high-pitched female voice started with a classic line. "Olivia, I'm begging you. If you're blind, then go get it treated. Can you stop staying blind and holding onto a trashy man like he's some treasure?" When I didn't respond, Clara's frustration showed in her voice. "Every time I bring this up, you just stay silent. What excuse are you trying to make for Santiago this time?" "Olivia, I know you can hear me. What did you tell me a few days ago? Santiago promised to celebrate your birthday?" "He promised nothing. You were happy for a few days, but now he's out there with another woman, making sure she doesn't get wet in the rain. And what are you? Say something. Olivia, don't tell me you're out there right now, getting ready to take Santiago an umbrella. Do you know that being blindly in love means you'll be digging wild herbs for 18 years? You've been doing it for 3 years now, and you can't get enough." Huh? I didn't say anything. Since I got together with Santiago, it had become a habit to get scolded by Clara 2 or 3 times a month. I curled up on the window seat, cautiously clicking on the enlarged image, my heart pounding. Santiago's first love posted a video on her moments, captioned with a pitiful "It's pouring. Who will come pick me up?" And my boyfriend, who was so busy that he replied to my messages only once in 3 days, appeared in her moments an hour ago. His side profile was captured, the line of his neck and shoulders as perfect as ever, making the girl beside him look even more petite and delicate, even without a full face shot. The atmosphere was palpable. I watched the video closely, then closed the screen. I replied to Clara with 3 ellipses. Clara fumed. "Say something. Olivia, how can you tolerate this?" I zoned out for a while longer. It wasn't until Clara was about to lose her mind that I slowly opened my chat with Santiago, looking at his message from an hour ago that he had managed to send amidst his busyness. Busy. Today was my 25th birthday, and that was the only message he had sent me in 3 days, not a birthday wish. Just 2 words, busy. I stared at the timestamp, perfectly matching the time on the screenshot from Moments, feeling stunned and not knowing how to react. I wanted to speak, but my throat felt clogged, and I couldn't say anything. I wanted to cry, but it felt like there were stones in my eyes, and I couldn't shed a tear. My emotions spun around and eventually settled on a laugh. I hadn't expected that. I actually laughed. Not just laughed, but laughed loudly. It must have sounded unsettling because Clara suddenly fell silent. She cautiously asked, "Olivia, are you okay?" "I'm great." I had intended to say it lightly, but when I spoke, there was a trace of grievance even I hadn't realized. "So great it makes me laugh." Clara paused. She said, "Of course you should be angry." The raindrops pounded against the window, the rain growing heavier and heavier. "Should I be angry?" "Of course. I should be angry." I hummed in agreement, hung up the phone, and typed out a message to Clara, wanting some quiet. Clara replied instantly, "I'm coming over." I declined her kind offer, insisting multiple times that I just wanted to be alone for a while, then tiredly set my phone aside. Chapter 2. It was at this very moment that I understood, no one is ever truly so busy that they forget about you. They just don't care enough. And people all have tempers. It wasn't that I didn't get angry. I just felt, in this relationship I couldn't let go of, that I had no right to be angry, no capital to throw a fit. Suddenly, it felt as if all the grievances from these 3 years erupted at once, and tears started falling without control. Just a moment ago, I thought I couldn't cry, but in reality, I was still so very sad, as if my heart was being tightly gripped. My eyes and my world were both raining, yet my boyfriend was out holding an umbrella for someone else. I curled up on the window seat, burying my head between my knees, trying to make myself smaller, even smaller. In my world, there was only the sound of the rain, pounding away. It was a long while before I lifted my head, casually dusting off the tatami on the window seat, straightening it neatly. I took a deep breath, stood up, and turned off the small floor lamp, then switched on the main lights. In an instant, the room was brightly lit, and the light stung my eyes. I habitually started tidying up the house. When I got to the guest room, it took a little longer than usual, because there were a lot of pet supplies piled up there. I had finally managed to convince Santiago to get a border collie as a birthday gift, but we hadn't even brought it home yet. All that was left were these supplies, cluttering the room. After tidying up the guest room, I walked out, and the cake on the table stood out vividly, with its custom floral ribbons bright and eye-catching. It was still untouched. It should have been opened 2 hours ago. By now, the cream might even have collapsed a little. It'd be a waste not to eat it. With that thought, I opened the cake myself. The cake in front of me was soft and sagging, the fluffy cream indeed collapsing. I pulled out a chair, the light stretching the shadow of the ribbons long, very long. My stomach rumbled. I'd been looking forward to today, and hadn't eaten much lunch, so I was a bit hungry. I didn't cut it, I didn't know why, but I couldn't muster the usual sense of ceremony or delicacy. I just dug into it with a fork, deliberately going for the word happiness in happy birthday. The whipped cream was soft and delicious, melting in my mouth, and the jam used to write happiness was passion fruit flavored. But it wasn't sweet. It tasted bitter, astringent. I paused, touched my face, and realized it wasn't the cream or the jam that was the problem. How could a dessert be bitter? It was my tears. I wiped my tears away, took a few more bites, each swallow getting stuck in my throat. I ate for a while before I suddenly realized something was wrong, like I'd forgotten something. I hadn't blown out the candles or made a wish. No matter what, you should make a wish on your birthday, right? I lit the candle, and in the weak, flickering light, my 25th year burned to its end. In the misty haze before me, I blew out the candle, finished the cake that I had dug into messily, and spent my first birthday in 3 years alone, the one Santiago had promised to spend with me. Santiago never came home that night, and I didn't sleep a wink. At first, I thought I was so upset that I would cry the whole night. But in the end, I cried until I felt dizzy, then felt so nauseated that I ended up hugging the toilet bowl, throwing up for half the night. I'd eaten too much. It made me sick. For the rest of the night, after tidying up the house, I packed all of my things as well. Everything from the large suitcases to the half-soured cream cake that had been left overnight in the summer heat. And even the few candles that had rolled under the coffee table, I swept them all into a trash bag, ready to throw them out, including this relationship, which had gone bad from the start. Chapter 3. I found a hotel to stay at temporarily. Initially thinking Santiago wouldn't even notice I'd moved out. But 3 years is 3 years, 1,095 days and nights. Lives that were never supposed to intersect had long since merged together, leaving traces of each other everywhere. The next morning at 9, Santiago sent me a message. "Where did you go?" By the time I woke up, it was already 2 in the afternoon. My stomach was churning uncomfortably, and I picked up my phone intending to order some congee, only to see Santiago's message. When I hadn't replied to his message from 9, he had sent another one later around noon, which was surprising. He'd sent me a picture of a well-packaged shopping bag. "Your birthday gift arrived." I opened the image, and the logo of a classic luxury brand was glaringly centered. My stomach still felt uneasy, and seeing that just made it worse. For a moment, I wanted to be impulsive, to rant at him, like I used to, and ask a bunch of questions, like, "Do you really think expensive means good? That's not what I like. That's not what I want." Like, "Where were you last night?" Like, "Do you still remember that you promised to spend my birthday with me?" But as the words sat there on the tip of my tongue, lingering on the screen for too long, they ended up turning into a short sentence instead. "No need. Santiago. Let's break up." Santiago, who usually replied at his leisure, unexpectedly replied immediately this time. He said, "Don't like it? Weren't you trying on bags in the store when we were shopping before? You seemed to like them. What gift do you want?" Then, I looked at his evasive response in silence. In the past, I would have unconsciously made excuses for him. I would have unconsciously stood in his shoes, thinking, maybe he's trying to make amends. Maybe he knows he was wrong yesterday. I rubbed my temples. "I don't want anything." I continued typing the next line. "Let's break up. Santiago." The chat window lingered on "the other person is typing" and "the other person is recording a voice message" for a long time. I thought he had something more to say. But in the end, all he managed to spit out was one sentence. He asked, "What's wrong?" I always thought I was emotionally stable right now, but when I saw those 3 words, I couldn't help but feel a rush of anger rise to my head. Who can understand this? You shout until you're hoarse, your rage turning into growing disappointment, and by the end, you don't even know how to express yourself anymore. Meanwhile, the other person stands there watching, indifferent. He knew nothing. The one who started it all was still innocently, even aggrievedly, asking you, "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, my fingertips trembling, and I simply flung the screenshot of the story Clara had sent me yesterday right in his face. Santiago replied with 3 ellipses. I had never felt so disappointed in him. I didn't even want to say anything more. I switched to Do Not Disturb on WeChat, planning to check out food delivery and order some congee to settle my stomach. The taste of having eaten sweets and then thrown them up, it was truly unbearable. When I finished ordering and switched back to WeChat, I was surprised to find that Santiago had sent a whole bunch of new messages 10 minutes ago. I skimmed them. "No, really. I don't understand. I didn't do anything." She posted on her moments. How could I control what she does? I didn't even know when she took those photos. We ended a long time ago. Yesterday. It was really just on the way. She called me, said she was in town on a work trip and felt so lonely. I couldn't just ignore her, could I? I haven't done anything to betray you. After dropping her off, I planned to pick up your gift and come home. But there was an urgent project at work. I didn't get home until 8 in the morning. I really don't know what she posted. If you don't believe me, ask my colleagues. Ask them. I really was working on the project yesterday. Once it's done, I'll have more time to spend with you. Maybe because I hadn't replied. Santiago, unaccustomed to waiting, sent another message 5 minutes later. "You're making me tired. Every time it's the same, you never wait for me to explain. And now you're using a breakup to threaten me?" I calmly replied, "Why should I listen to your explanation? Why should I wait for you to explain?" I hadn't planned on saying more, but he always had a way of easily pulling at my emotions. Maybe it's true that the people you care about most are the ones who know how to hit the softest part of your heart. I had placed him in the softest part of my heart, allowing him to hurt me until I was left bleeding. I almost exploded, letting all my grievances pour out at once. When I used to watch soap operas, I thought the female lead's heart-wrenching monologues were a bit melodramatic. When a relationship reaches its end, it's better to leave some dignity and beautiful memories. But those grievances were real. The unfulfilled needs that were never valued were real. The pain, like swallowing knives, was given to me by the person I loved the most. Why couldn't it be prevented before it happened? Why did we have to wait for an explanation afterward? Is she pitiful? Am I not pitiful? I waited for so long for a birthday gift, and it turns out to be this stupid bag. You can't even remember the dog toy we bought together just a few days ago, but you remember to give her a lift. Yes, you must be exhausted. I don't want a bag. I just wanted to adopt a border collie. I even thought of a name for it. I waited for you to come home until the whipped cream on the cake I was craving had completely collapsed. Do you know how cloying collapsed whipped cream is? You don't. I didn't even know what I was ranting about anymore, talking about all these insignificant little things. After venting, I silently curled up again, clutching my stomach. I let out a bitter laugh, feeling like a spoiled child throwing a tantrum over a toy they couldn't get. We're adults now. Better to leave with some dignity. I sighed, grabbed my phone again, and, unsurprisingly, Santiago hadn't responded. I typed and deleted and typed again, until I finally left only 2 short sentences. I'm sorry for what it's come to today. If I made you uncomfortable, I apologize. I'm sorry. Let's break up. Santiago. I lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling for half an hour, until the delivery kanji arrived. After drinking it, I glanced at my phone again, still no messages. I knew there'd be at least a few days of silence from him again. He was used to handling things this way. I used to think this wasn't emotional neglect, that he was also struggling and just wanted to retreat to his comfort zone to adjust his mood. But what about my mood? I took 2 dry sips of kanji, suddenly feeling how meaningless it all was. I clicked on Santiago's profile picture, my finger hovering over the delete button, and this time, I pressed it without hesitation. Chapter 4. When Clara barged in. I was putting on makeup. The weather was nice today. My room had a large floor-to-ceiling window, and sunlight filtered in through the sheer curtains. It was perfect for reading. After reading for a while, I felt a bit drowsy, so I decided to do my makeup and dress up a bit. The elegance of a girl is for herself to see. Seeing yourself looking good, of course, makes you happy. I suddenly felt that these kinds of days were quite nice, quiet, all by myself. If I could make a pot of tea, it would be even better. Being without Santiago wasn't so bad. So when Clara came in with a bag full of beer, she stared at me, wide-eyed in shock. After closing the door, she pointed and gestured, her tongue tied. Olivia, you're something else. You know that? I thought you'd be feeling worse than death. Completely devastated right now. I put down the curling iron, casually tousled my freshly curled hair, sat back down in the chair, found a lipstick, and while applying it in front of the makeup mirror, I finished her sentence for her. You thought I'd be disheveled, lying around in despair, didn't you? Clara circled behind me, clicked her tongue twice. This isn't like how you used to be when you broke up before. I paused for a moment. Breaking up with Santiago before? That was indeed a mess. From the initial heartbreak and buying drinks to drown my sorrows, to slowly getting used to curling up alone in dark corners, gradually processing those sad emotions, none of it resembled the person I truly was. Clara said, I was already prepared to tell you with full confidence that tonight, sis would drink until we're passed out. Olivia, but now you're making things hard for me. I turned to smile at her. So what are we going to do then? I pursed my lips, got up, squatted by the bag she had brought, picked out 2 cans of beer, and handed one to her. How about I say it instead, tonight? Sis will drink until we're passed out together. All right? Clara squatted down next to me, putting a hand on my shoulder, her tone carrying a warmth even she wasn't aware of. You said it, not me. If David ends up coming to the hotel to carry me home, I'm blaming you, Clara said, hugging me. Olivia, be happy. I was puzzled. Aren't you always pretty happy? Clara rolled her eyes dramatically and stayed quiet for a while. I looked up at her. She gazed at me gently, Just like when we first met in high school, the girl with a high ponytail looked fierce, incredibly aloof. But when you actually talked to her, her eyes held a rare, soft tenderness. She said, "I just want to see you happy too." Clara sighed, opening the beer. "Olivia, seeing you like this makes me genuinely happy. You two weren't right for each other. Really, not right at all." I also opened my can. I took a sip of the beer, the sharp sensation irritating my stomach that had finally started to feel better after the last few days. I felt a little dazed, honestly. I knew that Santiago and I weren't right for each other either. Clara and David have been together for 5 years now, and I've watched her grow younger, the two of them inseparable, whereas I seemed like a rose deprived of nourishment, once in full bloom, now slowly wilting, burning until nothing remained. Whether something works or not, you can tell from a glance at the state of things. Clara sighed and said, "A healthy relationship shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be just you constantly compromising and changing." I downed a gulp of beer. How could I not know that? I was more aware of it than anyone else. It's been 2 days since I deleted Santiago from my life, and he's remained silent, and I no longer hold on to the desperate obsession of not wanting to let go. On the contrary, I felt like I was gradually finding the old simplicity again, being happy purely for my own sake. Reading books, putting on makeup, chatting about anything and everything with friends, no matter how inconsequential. So I wasn't sad when Santiago came up. I just teased Clara. "Didn't you once swear you'd never change that habit of cursing? Didn't you say you'd never change for anyone? And if it didn't work out, you'd just find someone better?" Clara stared at her beer can for a long time. After a while, she finally reacted, muttering that she was going to tickle me. "Olivia, looks like you're totally fine now." I just giggled, telling her I'd never dare again. We ended up drinking ourselves to oblivion. The next day, I couldn't remember exactly what she said, just vaguely remembered us lying on the floor, poking each other and reminding the other that we shouldn't lie on the floor, it's too cold. Eventually, Clara scoffed. "Forget it, I just feel like lying here." After she said that, she laughed, playful, radiant, glowing, her lipstick already smudged on the beer can. But after drinking, her lips were even redder than a rose. It felt like we were both back at 18, carefree, daring to love and hate, unrestrained. She suddenly said, "Olivia, you're definitely my best friend. You sure know how to expose my secrets. Who changes for a guy anyway? I'm just going to be myself, no talk of compromise." But now, if it's him. Clara's tone shifted as she sat up, her nose red from the alcohol. "He's different," Clara repeated. "If it's David, then it's different." I burst out laughing. "Girl, you've been with him for 5 years, and now, just because of something I said, you're having second thoughts?" I grabbed my beer, sat up, clinked my can hard against hers, milky white foam spilling over the edge, falling on the back of my hand, disappearing in an instant. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, alcohol on my breath. "I really envy you. If in a relationship, the changes are the ones that should naturally happen, and if both people are growing together for the better, if the desire to improve yourself for your partner is treasured and reciprocated doubly, then it's not a compromise. It must have been some beer foam that drifted into my eyes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be crying like this again for no apparent reason." I looked at Clara seriously and said, "That is a precious shared affection between two people. Finding someone you're willing to improve for, someone who notices every small effort you make for them, is so hard. It's truly enviable. It's such an admirable, pure love." Sometimes I can't help but wonder, does Santiago like me? He must have liked me, because I could truly feel his sincerity in certain moments, and the details that showed he was trying, but he just didn't like me that much. His love came after so many other things. We just ended up missing each other. If it's meant to be, it will be. If it's not, there's no use in forcing it. One must learn to accept regrets, to accept imperfections, to accept that in the vast sea of people, sometimes we must part ways. Chapter 5. When people drink too much, they dream too, and the dreams are nonsensical. Bits and pieces here and there, like a patchwork. bizarre and outlandish. Ever since I started seeing Santiago, I rarely had dreams about him, but after drinking a lot this time, I dreamed of many things, most of which were those future moments I used to imagine. I really thought about it a lot. I imagined so much. For example, I wanted to travel to Las Vegas with Santiago, to go to the seaside and enjoy the breeze and drink with him. I wanted to spend every ordinary day together with Santiago. I also wanted to have a border collie. If we struggled too much with picking a name, why not just call it Lulu? It might be a bit of a silly name for such a majestic dog, but it would be a well-behaved dog, one that wags its tail whenever I called Lulu. If that day ever comes, whenever I thought about it, a genuine smile would always appear on my face. But we never had a border collie named Lulu. We never traveled together, and I smiled less and less. We were so close to having a border collie named Lulu. We were so close. Once Santiago finished his work, we'd have had time to go on that trip together. I know better than anyone that if I just went and coaxed Santiago now, if I admitted that I understood he didn't really do anything wrong and it was all just coincidence, we could continue, but I no longer wanted to. My WeChat profile background was a solid black image, with a line of text that said, "Olivia, cherish the moments of joy with you." Ever since I met Santiago, I hadn't changed. Everyone has those unspoken, hidden expectations. Each one, when spoken aloud, sounds grand, but in truth, they are so humble, so filled with grievance, that they tear apart a young girl's feelings in unexpected ways. When I desperately sought evidence of Santiago's love in those tiny details, I was perhaps already exhausting my desire to continue loving. After all, looking for love in the details was the wrong approach from the beginning. Love shouldn't need to be searched for. Love is an uncontrollable overflow. No matter what others say about a relationship, it doesn't really matter because they aren't in it. Without personal experience, no one can truly empathize, no matter what others said. I genuinely felt that Santiago liked me. At the very least, he once liked me. But all of that, in my years of emotional exhaustion, doesn't seem to matter anymore. I should have my own life. Even if it's not extraordinary, just thinking about what I want to eat today or what I want to do tomorrow, it's still more interesting than depending on someone else. I once loved Santiago deeply, but I finally understood that, having spent 25 years with myself, I should love myself more. Chapter 6. When I decided to leave the city, I only told Clara. It was a month after Santiago and I broke up. It wasn't that I was trying to escape from Santiago, it was simply a work transfer. If I really thought about it, moving to another city would be much better than staying here. Clara had once grabbed my ear and scolded me, saying, "Olivia, are you crazy? To give up yourself for someone else? Are you stupid or what?" I was stupid, so this time, I deviated from the Santiago-centered path. Turns out, it wasn't that hard after all. Before I left, I packed my things, but my emotions weren't entirely calm. I wasn't surprised when Santiago showed up at my door. In fact, 2 weeks earlier, Santiago had gone insane looking for me. Clara was fed up with it, complaining to me constantly, even saying things like, "Wasn't he supposed to be that cold and aloof type? Now he's acting like a stalker." When I heard that, I can't say I wasn't hurt, but it wasn't because I couldn't let go this time. It was more of a reflection on the ways of the world. I knew long ago that if it wasn't because Santiago liked me, I wouldn't have held on stubbornly, unwilling to let go. The more I understood Santiago's evasive personality, the more adorable I found those awkward little gestures of affection he offered. It was a kind of cuteness I carefully unearthed from the depths of a crowded sea of people. How could I not be softened by that? And so, I repeated my mistakes over and over again. Later, I understood that I couldn't change anyone. Perhaps, I never really wanted to change anyone's character to begin with. We both liked each other, and nothing big ever happened in our daily lives. Yet, we still had to part ways. Life is always a journey of accepting separations and regrets. The night before my flight, Santiago stayed in his car downstairs at the hotel the entire night. I saw him. He had lost weight. He looked neat, but the hand holding the cigarette trembled slightly. Looking so thin, he only called me once. "You see, This kind of person, he couldn't even bring himself to say a proper goodbye. Still, I went downstairs. I've always been a spontaneous person, not that cautious self I became when I was with him. People should be brave because regrets are only left to the timid. As long as I have no regrets, regardless of what others say or think, it's worth it. I didn't expect Santiago to stop me or hold me tightly, saying we'd never be apart again like in a soap opera. There was no grand drama, no drawn-out long time no see as an opening. There wasn't so much of a sense of fate. I no longer felt the excitement I once had. It was as calm as two old friends who were about to part ways, whose paths had intersected but were now diverging, parallel lines stretching out forever, never to meet again. Santiago's lips trembled slightly. In the end, he opened the car door and got out, habitually handing me a tissue, asking, "Are you hot?" He instinctively tried to grab my hand. The movement was so natural, but it stopped halfway. We stood there in silence, neither of us willing to break this rare peace. In the end, I said, "You should go home. It's hot out here." He looked at me silently, pulling at his collar in discomfort, as if he wanted to say something but swallowed it down. He nodded and went back to his car. As I watched him walk away, I suddenly remembered our beginning. Who confessed first? I looked at Santiago, deliberately turning his face away behind the car window, his eyes downcast, and the cigarette freshly lit again, and I felt a wave of confusion. I couldn't remember. Those heartbeats, those romantic moments, those genuine joys, they seemed to have been long sealed away. When you're in love, no matter how romantic, you can say anything. Now, opening your mouth feels like you're afraid of hurting each other. A birthday was merely the last straw that broke the camel's back. This way of being with each other, it had issues, but we couldn't change. We were always indulging in those rare moments of romance and thrill that came after God knows how long. But what remained were sharp thorns and differing lifestyles. Just a dull knife cutting through flesh. The last thing I said to him before I left was, "Santiago, can you buy me an ice cream? Not strawberry flavor." I added. I watched Santiago, silent, putting out his cigarette in the car. He said, "Olivia, if you've really decided to leave, stop talking about these things. It's meaningless." Feigning surprise, I replied, "Seriously? After 3 years? Santiago, I'm moving to another city, and you're not even willing to buy me an ice cream?" He didn't say anything. He didn't say he wasn't willing, nor did he say anything petty about us being broken up. He was always like this. I stood there, the play of light and shadow seeming to separate us. Santiago started the engine, its hum resonating as if he were about to drive away. I lowered my eyes. In the past, I liked making excuses for Santiago, and after some time, I increasingly understood what was in his heart. For instance, right now, I could easily guess based on his personality that he wouldn't say it. More accurately, he didn't dare to say it. He didn't dare say anything harsh, because he always thought there might still be a chance for us, because he always thought I was just a little upset. He was afraid of saying anything too definitive, leaving no way out, afraid of being too soft, losing face. I could see all of that, but still, I really wanted to tell him one thing. When I looked up again, I regretfully said, "All right, fine, don't buy it." But, Santiago, there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time. I just never found the opportunity. Now, I'll use it to say goodbye. Maybe even his engine couldn't stand it at this point. It hesitated, roared for a while, tires spinning but not leaving. The noise was loud, so I had to raise my voice too. I said, "Santiago, has anyone ever told you this?" Not answering the question is already an answer. Not answering is indeed already an answer. Some might instinctively deny this statement, thinking not everyone can say things out loud so easily. That's true. I admit that. But I am also human. I have my own thoughts and my own standards of judgment. If I kept compromising, I think we could at least be happy sometimes. But I can't spend my entire life betting that he might finally consider my feelings someday. That's not fair. No matter how much I like him, it's still not fair. I waved my hand, turned around, and didn't look back. I didn't know if Santiago eventually drove away, but the engine kept humming, staying put, neither advancing or retreating. But I left, walking further and further away. Time seemed to rewind frame by frame to that faded evening 3 years ago. Back then, we were still at university, and it was still midsummer. The evening breeze was calm and unhurried. Santiago and I walked side by side, our hands somehow intertwined, unwilling to let go even when sweaty. My steps grew slower, gradually falling behind him. He walked ahead, holding my hand. Suddenly, I called out to the boy whose ears had somehow turned bright red. I lifted my chin, saying in a haughty tone, "I'm going to die from the heat." Not moving anymore, he stood there, dumbfounded, not knowing how to comfort me. Naturally, he wasn't skilled at those flirtatious tricks. Despite having a face that looked like trouble, I laughed and said, "Santiago, buy me an ice cream. Buy me an ice cream, and I'll keep walking with you. Isn't that a great deal?" Back then, youth was all smiles and earnest joy. Even if he wasn't naturally passionate, he had that look of hope in his eyes, unable to hide it. And I wasn't the later version of myself, hesitant and insecure. I had always been headstrong and demanding. My pace remained as slow as it used to be, but my boy had already drifted apart from me. What happened afterward? Well, afterward, he smiled and handed me an ice cream. The sweet strawberry aroma lingered, although his smile was dazzling enough to make anyone lose focus. It was always a little clumsy. He said, "Do you like strawberry flavor?" Our fingers intertwined again at some point, palms hot and feverish. I opened my mouth, but couldn't say anything for a long time. I don't like strawberries. Actually, I don't even like ice cream, nor did I want any. But I liked this person so much, liked him so much that, at that moment, I needed a reason, any reason, for him to take me with him. And so that insignificant ice cream couldn't occupy a young girl's heart. It melted away, bearing witness to a teenage crush. It's all in the past. We must have truly liked each other. Chapter 7. The new city is neither good nor bad, and sometimes I really miss spending weekends hanging out with Clara. I've met new colleagues, new friends. Fortunately, I'm still not too far from Clara. Occasionally, when traveling for work, we still get to meet up. Life went on, neither too salty nor too bland. I found hobbies to fill my time, and it wasn't so dull. But as for Santiago, he wasn't doing well. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Time allowed my wounds to scab over, but it seemed to slowly tear his open, letting the pain ferment and spread until it festered. Never in my wildest thoughts did I imagine that one day I would receive an emotional letter from Santiago. I had completely disappeared from his world. After that day at the hotel, I blocked all possible contact methods I could think of. In the end, he made a new account and found me through Instagram. He's not someone who's good at saying sweet things, but he said that he had only now realized that his world had long since grown accustomed to my presence. I was unassuming. I wasn't so special that he needed to constantly confirm my existence. But once I was gone, he realized that even his ability to breathe began to diminish day by day. I had given him so much security and the feeling of being needed that he almost took it for granted, never considering that I might leave. So, my favoritism toward him became his entitlement, his reason for justifying putting me behind other things. He came to understand, belatedly, that what I had given him was affection and sincerity, not demands about having gestures and paying attention to details. He had once felt that I was controlling him, putting pressure on him, and being demanding. Even when he went out to have fun, I wanted him to constantly reply to my messages. He disliked this so much that he'd rather lie and say he was working overtime than tell me he was going out. He had once wondered why the girl who was so lively at first had turned into someone who constantly questioned and demanded from him. It took him a while to realize that if I didn't want the relationship, the solution wasn't solving the problem, it was simply getting rid of the person. When I finally did that, he, instead, seemed like an abandoned child. He said he was sorry. He shouldn't have hurt me so deeply, treating someone who truly cared for him that way. He said, "Olivia, I went to a friend's kennel and found a cute little border collie puppy. Should we get it together?" He said, "Olivia, let's go on a trip. To wherever you want. This time, I'll listen to you. I didn't reply. By the time I had let go, his messages didn't stir much emotion in me. It wasn't so much that his belated enlightenment had sparked a powerful love, but rather that he was too selfish. After going through all the grief and sorrow that he hadn't been there for, I no longer expected anything from him. Just like Santiago would occasionally go out to relax with his friends, I asked myself honestly, during those 3 years with Santiago, I never let him wait night after night, watching me laugh and have fun with someone else, leaving him alone. Many people would think, why didn't you hang out with friends when you were alone? Didn't you have your own social circle? If he didn't care about you, why didn't you stop caring about him? But that's not love. That's being petty. That's a game. That's making do. Forcing yourself to have a relationship so that you wouldn't be alone late at night. But love should be passionate and straightforward. It shouldn't be restrained. It's supposed to be the most romantic, the most vivid human quality. Losing the ability to truly love someone, to exchange genuine feelings, is a kind of regret. Forming bonds with others inherently carries the risk of tears. Santiago was just a passerby in my life. The fact that we didn't end up together and that I've moved on from him isn't a failure. And it's not shameful. It's courage. Next time I meet someone I like, I'll dare again. I'll mend the heart that got hurt because of him. And once the wounds are healed, I'll be brave enough to love the next person. I'll always dare. And I'll always have the courage to wait for the right one. Chapter 8. I didn't wait for very long. 6 months after I moved to another city, I met someone else. I didn't want to compare his actions or habits with Santiago's, nor did I want to lump him and Santiago together. When he first showed interest in me, I was honest with him. I told him I had someone in my heart, and even though I thought I had moved on, I couldn't guarantee my emotions wouldn't resurface. I didn't want to accept his affection at this time, as it wouldn't be fair to him. I thought he would, like the others who tried to chat me up these days, see my lack of enthusiasm and leave disappointed. But instead, he listened attentively to that long story of mine. I thought he would give up, that knowing how much I had once loved someone else would create a distance. But he didn't. He smiled at me, his eyes crinkling. Olivia, the person you loved must have been very lucky. If he didn't cherish it, he should be the one feeling sorry. Is there anything wrong with loving someone? Honestly, the wind that night was very strong. I was huddled in my coat, aimlessly shaking my beer can. Cold hands didn't matter. But suddenly, I thought that maybe holding the hand he extended toward me wouldn't be so bad. And until we got engaged, until we got married, I never thought of Santiago again. This is my farewell to the past. And I don't want to bring the new person into it too much because no one can replace the experience of saying goodbye to oneself and the past. Relying on someone new to make up for the damage caused by someone old is, at its core, a selfish act. I wanted to truly walk away from the memories with Santiago, all on my own, and I think I really did it. Time is the best medicine for healing everything, and I am not beyond saving. As long as I haven't lost the hope of loving someone, no one is beyond saving when it comes to love. Chapter 9. On the day of my engagement, Santiago somehow managed to find Clara and ask her to show me something. She took it, though she hadn't planned to show it to me. I had no idea, but when I saw Clara in the makeup room looking restless, I asked her out of sheer curiosity, "Did Santiago tell you to say something to me?" I hadn't brought up that name in a long time. Clara almost lost her composure. She ran her hands through her hair in frustration, only realizing afterward that she had messed up her carefully done hairstyle. For once, she even cursed in front of David. "Forget it," she spat. "Who cares about him?" I looked at her calmly. Under my quiet gaze, she sighed and said, "Olivia, I wasn't planning on bringing this up today. He knew you'd be back for your wedding, so he blocked my front door early in the morning." Looking lost, I was going to kick him a couple of times, she grumbled, visibly uncomfortable, before taking out a small, folded piece of paper from her purse. "But maybe it's better if you see it for yourself." As I unfolded it, I could tell how reluctant Clara was to accept it and show it to me. She had folded this full, tightly written letter into such a tiny square. Honestly, for a moment, I did feel something, a fleeting sense of confusion. It wasn't love rekindled. Just an inexplicable feeling. Fate works in circles. The right people will meet again, while the wrong ones must eventually be let go. And like every story, this one must also have an ending. Just like now. As the sudden ringing of my phone broke the silence, I answered Santiago's call. His voice was trembling, barely containing his excitement. "Olivia, have you seen it?" I said. "Not yet." He spoke cautiously. Okay, I'll wait until you've read it." Santiago had done many things over the years. For example, he actually did adopt that little border collie, where he dug up the old diary entries we wrote in our couple's space years ago, where he finally realized how my love had bloomed brightly before slowly dying out, turning cold. Every word in his letter was filled with memories, those small details from the past that I thought he would never remember. It turns out that people who are tormented by memories do indeed remember every little detail, sharpening themselves painfully over time. I finished reading quietly. To be honest, I felt no great emotion, just like when I read Santiago's heartfelt messages years ago. I simply lowered my gaze for a few minutes, then carefully folded the handwritten letter back along its creases until it was the same as when I first received it. I tossed it into the trash. The arc was pretty nice, and I threw it accurately. I wasn't that girl from years ago who watched Santiago play basketball, always teased by him for never making a basket. I spoke into the phone to Santiago, whose breathing had grown increasingly ragged on the other end. I finished reading it. He let out an ah, as if it was squeezed from his throat. I continued. "I'm getting married. Santiago, don't do this. It's over." The mildly warm wind of that summer, the rustling leaves, and the sunlight that once painted the outline of a clean, innocent young boy, all of it has drifted far away. They too have become a memory, folded into a letter whose final resting place is not heartfelt words but a trash bin. I think I understand why. Just a moment ago, I had this inexplicable sense that Santiago had something to say through Clara. It must have been the very last bit of fate between Santiago and me. When people are on the brink of never crossing paths again, they make one final effort. It may be a rekindled feeling after a long time, or it may be an attempt to hold on or to seek forgiveness. Most, unfortunately, fall into the latter category. Santiago tried to hold on and plead, while I chose farewell and forgiveness. He broke down almost instantly, the composure he'd managed to maintain crumbling entirely. He wanted to keep me. He choked up. "Olivia, why was it you who decided to start this? And now you're the one ending it? Don't leave me." He wanted to beg. He said, "Olivia, I'm sorry. It was my fault that you never felt my love." He said, "Olivia, I just want to be with you. Olivia." Santiago's pauses felt unnatural, his voice sounding choked up. "Olivia, please, be a little more kind to me, okay?" I was silent amidst his breakdown, just as he had once been silent with me. I once called Santiago while drunk, vomiting and crying, and said, "Santiago, if you just say to me, let me be more patient and gentle with you, I will never leave you." But he didn't even pick up. Now that I've completely let go, he says all those things I once longed to hear, all those words I once desperately wanted. If only he had said them earlier. Just a little earlier, I would have been so happy. I would have thrown myself into his arms, softened my heart again and again. But now, I don't need them anymore. True feelings always have an order. I took a deep breath, and as I exhaled, I was nearly calm. "Santiago, true love always has its timing. Why are you always the one who's late?" Forming bonds with someone means you have to be ready to shed tears, but only if it's worth it. Just before I hung up, I spoke softly. "Next time you meet a girl you like, you have to change. Don't make her sad like I was. I don't blame you. Let yourself go." I always thought that when you hang up on someone you love, the sound is harsh, which is why I never wanted to be the one to end the call. But somewhere along the way, between Santiago and me, I became the one to leave first. As the phone screen darkened, I looked at Clara and smiled. "You were right. I needed to hear it. Honestly, it feels pretty good, karma, I guess." Clara shook her head and hugged me tightly. "You're not that cruel, Olivia." I nodded. "No, I wasn't cruel, and I didn't find much joy in it. The switching of roles, the turning of the tables, didn't bring me the satisfaction of revenge, only the sense of closure from completely letting go of the past, of sealing away the memories. I forgive all the obsession, the sorrow, the heartbreak, and the love that became hysterical in the end. I said goodbye to all those old memories, rewinding my past with Santiago to that very first summer when we met. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't have taken that ice cream. Or perhaps I wouldn't have asked for it in the first place. I wouldn't have let myself be tempted to go home with him. I would have smiled, softly but firmly, and said, "It's too hot today, so I'll just head home." Then I'd turn around, keep walking, until, before we ever met, we simply passed each other by.